Hey everybody, and welcome to the Bluegrass Soccer Academy. My name is Charlie Hamilton. This is Chris Dunham, and we will be your host this evening. Real quickly, before we dive into tonight's episode, wanted to give a quick shout out. Dunham, we got some new swag.
I like it.
Yeah, they're great. Glenna Martin hooked us up with some shirts to represent on the podcast. So those of you watching on YouTube see it. Those of you that are listening have no idea what we're talking about. But thanks to Glenna, we definitely appreciate it. Tonight, we're going to dive into a conversation with Olivia Swafford about the recruitment process. Our goal with this whole little series where we are talking to players is to give those current players who are, maybe they're just entering high school, maybe they're currently going through this process, or maybe they've already committed, and we're trying to decide what we want to do with that and what to expect with that process. So we just want to give some insight. Players that have gone through this before, players that know what they're talking about, that have gone to all different levels of college soccer, and just hopefully pass on some advice to those players that are going through it, and maybe even the parents that have players going through it. So that's our goal with all of this.
Absolutely. Tonight's conversation, we're going to be speaking with Olivia Swafford. She was a four-year starter in high school, went on to play at Southern Indiana University.
Right.
So before we get started here, there's a few acronyms you're going to hear during this episode. You're going to hear MRL, which is the Midwest Regional League. I don't think that's available anymore at this time. But at that time, it was the premier league around our area. You're also going to hear ECNL, which is the Elite Club National League, which is the current highest level for club soccer right now. So let's dig into this conversation and let's hear about recruiting.
All right, I'm excited. Let's do it.
Absolutely.
All right. Hi, Olivia. How are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
We're doing well. Nice to see you. It's been a while.
Good to see you all too.
So, Dunham, you got the privilege to coach Olivia. I actually got to teach Olivia. And for those that are watching on YouTube, watching us live or watching the video feed, this is Olivia circa 2010, I think.
I think it was 2010.
So that is wonderful fifth grade Olivia.
Yes.
And
We do love embarrassing our guests,
We
just
do.
so you know.
And so she, this won't come as a shock to you, but she was a soccer star back then as well. And she was privileged enough, lucky enough to get the opportunity to go through this whole recruiting process that we're going to talk about tonight. So let's just dive right into it.
Yeah, Olivia, we're discussing the recruiting process here. So to get a little background, would you give us your career on soccer, when you started, teams, clubs, anything that you can give us here would be great.
Yes. So I started playing soccer when I was 3 years old, I believe. Around the age of 7 or 8 is when I started to play club, and I did that in Richmond. And after a few years of playing club in Richmond, I ended up playing for LFC in Lexington. And from there, I also did high school soccer, and then I committed to play at the University of Southern Indiana.
And so I know that you played in the MRL League, which was the Midwest Regional League. Was the ECNL available at that time for your club?
No, I do not think so.
That seems to be a newer formation, a newer league that is popping up quite a bit now. I think maybe at the time that Olivia was going through, and I may be wrong on this, but I think that MRL was the top league. I think that's the league you wanted to play in.
Right.
I believe
and now you do see those ECNL leagues and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that sounds
So,
right.
with the recruiting process, I think everybody has different paths here. So were there things that you did to get your name out there, different coaches? What was your process in the recruiting?
The biggest thing with recruiting is communicating to coaches, getting your name out there, inviting coaches to come watch you play at tournaments, and then communicating with them after they see you play is probably one of the most important parts for me, at least. Reaching out before, giving them your schedule, telling them what field you'll be on, and then after thanking them for coming. You can do that in person or on email.
Now, was this something that your parents set up for you? Was your coach involved in this? Who really gave you a template to work through these process?
My club coach was so great when it came to helping us with the recruiting process. He walked us through what to say in an email, how to send an email, and then we also had a player profile that included a picture of us and then some stats maybe. And then so we would email all of that before, and that was because my coach was able to be very knowledgeable in that situation, which is great because not everybody knows how to go about doing that.
I think you and I, as high school coaches, we know there's a lot of misunderstanding about the recruiting process. So it's nice to have that availability from your club coach there.
Yes.
So I'm assuming that since your club coach gave you all this detailed information, what about film? Did you send film to any of your coaches?
I never did do that. I'm sure there are people that are. The only film that I ever really had as a player was high school film. And typically we would send our club information more so than high school. So really it was just sending your information, who you are and who you play for, and then them seeing you in person rather than sending film.
So who are you having these conversations with? You know, you said you're sending these emails to coaches and they would respond. Are you talking with head coach, assistant coach? Was there a recruiting specific coach, or did it vary between the schools?
I believe I would send them to both the head coach and the assistant coach because you never know which one is going to be there that weekend. So it's good to go ahead and send it to both the head and assistant.
Olivia, when did all this kind of start for you? Would you say freshman year of high school?
Yeah, I would say about freshman year in high school is when you really need to step it up when it comes to communicating with coaches. They may look at you before then, but once you're in high school is when you really start. And then I'd say by junior year is when you really get all of the communication with them.
And I think that is because there are, a lot of these college, or not a lot, all of these college coaches have those NCAA restrictions that they have to abide by. And I don't think, and Olivia and Dunham, you may know more about this than I do, but I don't even think a coach is allowed to reach out to you until like the summer before your junior year. Is that correct?
Yes. You're able to reach out to them and send them emails, but they will not respond to you, which that's completely normal. That's just the rules until
Right.
you get to that age.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's important to know because there are some strict violations if they're found out contacting freshman, sophomore year, or even prior to. So important to know those rules.
And I think Olivia brings up a good point in it's okay if they're not responding right now.
Mm-hmm.
There are other things going on. Your job as a freshman and a sophomore is just to get your name and face out there as much as you possibly can.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes. And even if you invite them to one game, in the future, continue to reach out to them. You're going to play differently in different games. So it's important to keep contact with different coaches and all kinds of different schools. I wouldn't try just one school. I would do multiple.
Good. So let's move forward in the recruiting process. You've got emails out, maybe not you specifically, but film is out. So you've got conversations going on between coaches here.
Yes.
What conversations are you having with these coaches when they show interest back in you coming in for them?
Yeah, I liked to ask them for how they feel about me as a player. What do they see potential in? What can I work on? How could I fit in with your team? And then from there, it's important to maybe try to get on campus and see how you like the school. And from there is when you can make more decisions on where you want to end up.
Was there anything, Olivia, specific in those conversations that maybe you personally were listening for, whether it was about your development or about even the school that you were listening for, that kind of set off a red flag in your head that was like, okay, this is not the place for me?
Yeah, and that varies from school to school and coach to coach. It really depends on what you're looking for personally. You need to pay attention to the size of the school, the distance from home, You need to pay attention to where this coach may have you on the field. Is it your normal position? Because sometimes coaches see you somewhere else than what you're used to. So those are all important things to know when you're talking to them.
Yeah. You mentioned going to these schools. Give us kind of a play-by-play of these school visits. And were all of your visits official visits? And what does that mean between an official and unofficial visit for you?
Honestly, this is not for the thing. I don't really remember much about the official, and I remember it, but not really enough to like.
I think the biggest difference between the official and unofficial is that if you're on an official visit, everything is paid for by the school. Your travel to get there, your hotel, your stay, things like that is paid for by the school.
Yeah,
And I think the unofficial, it would just be on, the Swaffords to make sure that that's paid for.
Yeah.
So let's assume everything was an official visit. So what is the play-by-play? You've got a date set up for the school. What happens upon your arrival?
Yeah, so usually you'll meet a player who will come introduce you to everybody. You'll go see the team, the locker room, the field. You'll go meet the coaches, and then sometimes you get to practice with the team and see how that goes for you. And then a lot of places will let you stay the night with some of the girls on the team to really get the feel of what it would be like being there.
Were you able to question players on the team about the coach specifically? Like, I'm got a nice guy here telling me everything I want to hear. Is that really what he is? Were you getting an opportunity to kind of dissect what the coach is really like?
Yeah, you can get to know the girls on the team. Usually, they'll give you a sort of a rundown, maybe. They won't necessarily tell you bad things because they're trying to get you to get recruited to the team, but you can really ask the girls anything you feel like you want to ask them.
Yeah, and I think you and I have discussed it before. There are two sides to every college coach. Mm-hmm. There's the recruiting coach who's going to be a salesman, basically.
Yes.
And then there's the on-field coach who is there to get you ready to win. And some of those personalities can be very different. Mm-hmm. Some can be confrontational. Yes. And you just got to kind of work through if you can deal with that type of situation.
Yeah, definitely. The coach.
So you've done a bunch of site visits. Mm-hmm. You're nearing down your decisions. So what's going through your head now to decide between schools A, B, and C? Was there anything that was a priority for you? Maybe your parents were influencing you. What about these schools made you narrow down your decisions here?
It's really important to look at the schools outside of the soccer aspect. You can be looking at a school 8 hours away and a school 2 hours away, and you need to think, would I be happy traveling this distance when I need to come home? You also need to pay attention to what majors the school offers, because not every school has every major that you may want to do. And then also the teammates, the coaches, are these people that I'm going to be okay spending the next 4 years with?
I think really something that's really important that you hinted at, you didn't come out and say it, but you hinted at, when we ask you about what went into your decision making, what are some things like that, the first two things that you bring up are not even soccer related.
Right.
It's not just about soccer during this process. And I think for recruits to understand that and really accept that is extremely important.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's important to understand that collegiate soccer is a whole different level of soccer than probably what anybody's used to going into school. And you never know if you're going to have a career-ending injury. You never know if you're going to have a change of heart. So it's important that you'd be happy with that school outside of soccer.
So one last question on the decision-making process. Obviously you have coaches contacting you. Were any of the players reaching out to you saying, hey, we think you're a good fit here?
That's not necessarily the most common thing, because they have players coming in and out all the time looking at the schools, but it wouldn't be uncommon to maybe reach out on social media and ask questions. I believe there was a girl at Southern Indiana specifically who I would talk to on Instagram occasionally if I had questions about anything that maybe I didn't get to ask before.
And Olivia, before we get into what life is like after you make that decision, How involved were mom and dad for you? How involved were your parents or anybody else in that decision-making process for you?
My parents were pretty involved with the process. It was a lot of sitting down in the living room and discussing the town these places we're in. Are they going to be okay with me being there? Coaches would, or my club coach would check in with me often and see where my head is at. So that's really it. My parents and my club coach were really involved in the process, but other than that, that's about it.
And following up with that, with the parents, were your parents having conversations with the head coaches, or the coaches specifically only speaking with you?
Specifically only with the player. I don't think they really care to hear from your parents at all. At that age, you're getting old enough to where you should be able to communicate yourself and show that you can be independent. And I mean, communication with your coaches is good anyways. So I would not recommend having parents do any of the reaching out.
Yeah, and I bring that up. I think it's important for any parents that are watching that when your son or daughter goes off to college, they're an adult.
Yeah.
And they need to show that they are an adult as well to these head coaches. So they're going to speak with them to see if they're responsible, if they're mature enough. And that goes in their decision making as well.
Yeah, and then once you are on the team, it's going to be the same thing. The coaches aren't really going to hear from your parents. It's all you. So I would go ahead and start showing that in high school to show that you are independent enough to go be there and play for that team.
All right, Olivia. So you, as we've kind of hinted at, and we've mentioned, you committed to Southern Indiana, went up there to spend your freshman year playing soccer. But after that initial commitment, I don't know if it was a phone call or an email that you sent and said, hey, I'm committed, let's do this. What were kind of the emotions you were feeling?
It's very relieving to know that you know where you're going to be so you can start picturing your future. It's also nerve-wracking because you know that there's somebody watching you, expecting you to come be this great player on their team. So you really have to keep up with your fitness because right before you go, usually once you start, you're going to have preseason almost immediately. So it's important to stay in shape and stay on yourself and hold yourself accountable for what you're about to do.
And what did you officially commit to SIU? Was it your senior year, junior year? What time period was that in?
Was it my junior year, I believe?
Yeah, I think coming into your senior season at high school, you were already committed. But I don't recall if it was the spring of junior season or over the summer. I'm not sure what that time period was.
Okay, well, I believe I verbally committed sometime during my junior year. And then I don't know when I officially signed the papers, but it would have been around my junior year.
And I believe that's pretty common. I think a lot of college coaches want to tie their players up their junior year. Mm-hmm. So if they're short a player, they've got time to tie more people in if they need to.
Yeah, there are some cases where you may commit sophomore year, but I feel like the majority of players usually settle down their junior year of high school.
So you mentioned preseason. Talk to us a little bit about getting to campus and just kind of the everyday life of a college soccer player once you arrive.
Yeah, preseason is a bit different than your actual soccer season. Preseason is a lot of running, sprinting, weightlifting very often.
All the things you love?
Yes, so much fun. That's, I believe, 2 weeks. Once you get there, it is tough, but it's doable. And then once the actual soccer season starts, it's usually at least one practice a day for multiple hours. And then there's a traveling roster. If you travel on the weekends. And typically if you don't travel, you'd stay back in condition with the other players that don't go.
Yeah, I think that's important to understand as well, that when you get there, there is the travel squad that's going to play. And there are people that stay behind that don't travel with that team. And that's something that some people need to get adjusted to because they're probably coming from high-level clubs. They play every weekend, and they're not going to be used to saying it's not your time yet.
Yeah, and I mean, it could be anybody. It's not always the same people who travel. I wouldn't take it to heart. It's just you just have to keep proving yourself. That's just part of collegiate soccer.
Yeah, and that's the second time you've mentioned that is continuing to prove yourself. It's almost like, the recruitment is one step, but once you get on campus, it just almost kind of like restarts. I guess it's not a recruitment period, but it is that period of, okay, I'm here, great, but now I got to make that next step too. I got to continue to show the coaches that, hey, I'm here for a reason.
Yeah, and then another difference with collegiate soccer and club soccer and high school soccer is that pretty much everybody on your college team is going to have that same love and passion for soccer that you do, and they clearly have a high work ethic. So it's not like you're going to be comparing yourself to people who aren't on your level. Everybody's competing to start. Everyone's competing to get hours or minutes in the game. So you always have to keep pushing yourself.
Yeah. Looking back on your first season and, and when you're in high school, you're not really sure what you're getting into and you have different expectations. Was there something that happened in your first season at the collegiate level where you said, I did not see that coming?
For me, my issue was having an ACL injury going into it. And it was really hard to come back from an injury at that level. Also, the traveling hours and your school hours are really hard to get used to because you have to go to class and then you have practice, and it's just a really never-ending schedule that you can't really prepare yourself for. You just have to kind of get thrown into it.
Yeah, I think that's a good point there. People need to understand that you're basically working 2 full-time jobs. Mm-hmm. You're going to school full-time and you're an athlete full-time, and it's a lot of responsibility to keep up with.
Yes, it is.
Olivia, you just brought up your ACL injury. So, Olivia tore your ACL, I think, not early on, but maybe the first third of the season, your senior year. Mm-hmm. And so you spent the rest of the year recovering, things like that, doing the rehab. Was there any conversations with SIU at that point, like, hey, just a heads up, I've torn my ACL, what were those conversations kind of like?
Yes, I believe I sent an email to the head coach soon after it happened and was like, this is where I am. I am still interested in playing. They're very understanding. It's something that's not uncommon, unfortunately. Right. A lot of girls experience this. So they really, typically most places I would say would have a little protocol in place. It was a little unfortunate for me because I didn't get the post-ACL, recovery at the collegiate level, if that makes any sense. If you tear your ACL or have any injuries in college, they can work right next to you every single day. But they're very used to it. Coaches are typically going to be very understanding. And if you still want to go forth with it, then I say go for it.
Awesome. So, Olivia, after, now that we've kind of re-walked you through your process and re-walked you through that first year at SIU, is there anything with the whole recruitment process that you wish you would have done differently or maybe wish you would have done or anything like that?
I remember being stubborn in high school and not wanting to always put in the energy to look up schools. My parents were very good about pushing me to do that, and I feel like I could have done better at seeing all that's out there. There's more than what than what I probably realized there are. So if I could do anything differently, it would be to put more effort into searching.
And then what about the advice you might give to someone who's coming in their freshman year, freshman year of high school? It's pretty clear the talent is there. They have some aspirations to play at the next level. What advice would you give that player?
The advice that I would give is to communicate with coaches as much as you can and go see the schools in person as much as you can. You really have to put in the effort if you want to end up where you want to be. Really just communicate talk to everybody, talk to your coaches, talk to your parents, go see schools. Without going to see schools in person, I feel like you don't really get the full vibe of what you're going for. So definitely put in those hours of going to see them on the weekends if you can.
I mean, it almost, and this may not be a popular answer, but it almost feels like a big homework assignment. It's one of those things that, if you really want to live that dream, you're going to have to put in the work, early on in the process,
especially at that age. I feel like it's easy to not want to do those things just because you feel like you don't have to, but you really should.
And what about the kids who have already committed and they're preparing for their first college year? What's your advice to them going into their collegiate level?
Yes. Before you go off to college, do not put off your preseason packet, if you have one, full of your exercises, because it is not a good feeling going into that and feeling like you're not on the same level as everybody else. So definitely run at home. Even if you don't want to, it's important that you do, and you would thank yourself for it later on.
Awesome. Well, Olivia, any final thoughts or anything from you, or Coach Dunham, anything from you?
I don't believe so.
All right. Well, we appreciate you. Thank you so much for coming on with us, and we will hopefully talk to you soon.
All righty. Thank you.
Thanks, Olivia. All right. A great conversation there with Olivia. It was nice catching up with her.
Yes.
I thought she said some really important things, some really interesting things talking about that process. We just want to do a real quick kind of brief summary rundown, especially to hopefully some players that are listening. I think the first thing that she mentioned was freshman year, start reaching out. If you know that this is something you want to do, freshman year, you got to start sending out those feelers to coaches, to places that you want to play for. Sounds like she had a really good club coach.
Which is really nice, because not everybody's going to have that availability.
Right. But with Google and the internet, I mean, it's quick to Google, University of Kentucky girls soccer coach and find out who it is and send a message. I think that's really important. Make sure as a recruit that you are sending out those feelers very quick, because as we mentioned in the conversation, those coaches aren't allowed to contact you until later on in your career. So it is important to let them know early on, hey, I'm interested.
Yeah, and I think it's important people understand that NCAA, NAIA, they all have rules as far as coaches contacting players, and there's some pretty severe violations if they get caught contacting freshmen and sophomores. So reach out to them. Make sure you know your rules as well, but I think that's a great point. Get started early rather than late.
Definitely.
So the second point we want to look at that Olivia pointed out was, don't focus just on the soccer when you're selecting your schools. Whether you have 5 coaches talking to you or 2 or 1, maybe that one doesn't fit you as far as they don't have the program you want to get into. Maybe it's the distance is too far away. What's the coach like? What are the players like? College may not be that different from high school. There's probably be a little bit some clicks here and there. Do you get along with the players? Do you think the coach is trying to pull one over on you just to get you to sign with them? So look at all the aspects, not just the soccer. Do you like the area? Is the city even fun? There's a lot of things to look at, not just the soccer part.
And I think those conversations are ones that are very important, whether, that you should be having with multiple people, not only the coaching staff and the players, but also with mom and dad, or, who's at home with you, teammates, things like that, because, you're making a big commitment, you are. And as Olivia said, if soccer doesn't work out, and like it didn't for her because of some injuries and things like that, but you got to make sure you're going to be happy with where you chose.
Absolutely.
The other thing, and you just kind of hinted at this, is the recruiting coach versus the field coach. I think we've all kind of dealt with that, where you meet this person off to the side, and they're kind and great, and they shake your hand, and they love you.
Very diplomatic.
And then when it's go time, or in a intense moment in a game, things changes. Their demeanor changes. The way they speak, the way they act changes.
Yep.
And knowing those things, I think, is very, very important. And I think that's difficult to latch onto, especially during this recruiting process. But I think maybe even something as simple as attending a game. Go watch the school that you're being recruited by or that you're thinking of committing to. Go watch them play one night and keep an eye on the coach during the game. See how he does react to certain things. Yeah,
and I think the school visits become very important here because now you're getting to see firsthand what these people are like. If you can attend when they're having preseason or maybe they're in season, they got practices going on. Just like you said here, Hamilton, what's he like during a game? Also, talk to the players. Hey, what's this coach really like? He's telling me he's so sweet. He's telling me all the things I want to hear, but what's he really like on the field?
Right.
So it's important to get all the details and not just what you're hearing at face value.
Absolutely.
So the fourth thing we want to look at, I think this is one of the most important things, is always prove yourself all over again. As Olivia said, from high school, whether you're a big powerhouse or maybe you're in the MRL league, Premiership League, and maybe you're just a super stud, none of that matters because everybody else there is probably going to be the same type of person. So when you show up day one, tell yourself over and over again, I got to prove myself. I got to show everybody that I'm here for a reason and I deserve to be here.
And I think Olivia even used that phrase of, even after I committed, I still had to prove myself. I still had to show those coaches that the commitment they made to me was worth it. I think that's absolutely very important. All right, well, that will do it for today's episode. It was a lot of fun.
Absolutely.
Good
catching up
to
with Olivia.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And we appreciate you tuning in. And this has been the Bluegrass Soccer Academy. Thank you.